Welcome to Co-Pilot Podcasts. Imagine driving from New York to Los Angeles without ever stopping to charge your electric car. No plugs, no charging stations, no range anxiety. Just pure, continuous power generated by the vehicle itself while you drive. Today, we're diving into ElectraMax by Norton Smart Solutions, a technology that claims to have cracked the code on battery-free electric vehicles using something called kinetic feedback loops. We'll explore how this system works, what the Department of Energy thinks about it, and whether this could actually eliminate our entire charging infrastructure. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is ElectraMax claiming to do?
So according to the page content, ElectraMax is built around what they call a 700V kinetic feedback loop with active inertia management. The core claim is that this system generates its own power while driving, essentially creating what Jacob Norton calls an infinite range propulsion system.
Wait, infinite range? That sounds like it's breaking the laws of physics. How is this supposed to work?
Well, the page content indicates that the system self-sustains, regenerating power during descent and eliminating the charging bottleneck. It's described as delivering megawatt-class power without traditional battery banks. The TikTok content mentions a 12,000 RPM kinetic loop.
Okay, so we're talking about some kind of advanced regenerative system. But let's get specific. What are the actual performance numbers they're claiming?
According to what I found, they're advertising a 185 HP prime mover with 170 HP continuous traction, and they claim zero recharging required. The system supposedly generates its own 700V power bus in real time while driving.
185 horsepower isn't massive by today's standards, but if it truly never needs charging, that's revolutionary. What about the different models? I saw references to CGEED 185 and CGEED 1200.
The page content mentions these model numbers, though the specific details are limited. There's also reference to a Series 185 drivetrain and something called the Cascadia SS 250 in the prototype development phase.
Interesting. Now, let's put this in context. What's happening in the broader EV market right now that makes this technology particularly relevant?
Great question. The page content shows that as of early 2026, EVs account for approximately 8 to 9% of new vehicle sales in the US. But there are some major headwinds. The Trump administration abolished the federal tax credit for EVs in September, and Cox Automotive forecast a 28% decrease in EV sales for Q1 2026.
Wow, a 28% decrease? That's brutal. But I also saw something about gas prices rising.
Exactly. According to Ars Technica, gas prices are up almost $1 per gallon, that's 25%, due to the war in the Persian Gulf. AAA data shows they've nudged past the $4 per gallon psychological barrier.
So we have this perfect storm, EV incentives disappearing just as gas prices spike. That could create a huge market opportunity for something like ElectraMax.
And here's what's really interesting. Auto Pacific research shows that when gas hits $4 per gallon, 30% of vehicle owners begin exploring different vehicle types. The page content indicates it would take prices rising $1.25 more per gallon to really kickstart powertrain switching.
We're almost there then. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, charging infrastructure. How big of a problem is this currently?
The numbers are actually pretty encouraging for traditional EVs. The page content shows over 204,900 public charging ports at more than 72,000 station locations across the US. But the deployment is still uneven, and range anxiety remains a real issue.
Right, and if ElectraMax actually works as advertised, it would make all of that infrastructure irrelevant. That's either incredibly disruptive or incredibly threatening, depending on your perspective.
Absolutely. The page content mentions that continued expansion of charging infrastructure remains a key factor for future EV adoption. But if you eliminate the need for charging entirely, you're talking about a fundamental shift in the entire industry.
Now, I have to ask, what does the government think about this? I saw something about Department of Energy review.
Yes, according to Jacob Norton's LinkedIn post, the technology is currently under technical review by the US Department of Energy, with the designation number A202640. He describes this as affirming its potential.
That's significant. The DOE doesn't review just anything. What about the company behind this, Norton Smart Solutions?
Jacob Norton is described as the Chief Executive Officer with expertise in quantum mechanics and biological systems. The page content indicates the company is based in North Wilkesboro and they're actively seeking strategic partners for commercialization.
Quantum mechanics and biological systems, that's an interesting combination for automotive technology. It suggests they might be approaching this from a completely different angle than traditional automakers.
And the page content shows Norton's inspiration comes from the pursuit of radical energy independence and biological optimization. They're not just thinking about cars, they mention applications for heavy lift aviation, even aircraft like the 747.
Wait, they're talking about powering a 747 with this technology? That's massive. How would that even work?
The page content mentions the ElectraMax Aero Core delivering megawatt-class power needed for aircraft like the 747 without the weight of traditional battery banks. They claim it regenerates power during descent.
You know, that actually makes me think about the Cessna 185 information in the page content. That aircraft is beloved because it can haul nearly 3/4 of a ton while being incredibly reliable. Power to weight ratio is everything in aviation.
Exactly. And if you can eliminate battery weight entirely while maintaining power output, you're solving one of the fundamental challenges in electric aviation. The page content shows the Cessna 185 has a 300 HP engine. Imagine replacing that with a battery-free electric system.
That's a fascinating parallel. But let's bring this back to ground vehicles. What would nationwide adoption of this technology actually look like?
Well, the page content shows that industry forecasts project EV market share reaching 20 to 30% by 2030 under base case scenarios. But those projections assume continued charging infrastructure expansion and sub $35,000 long-range models.
Right, but ElectraMax could potentially accelerate that timeline by eliminating two major barriers: charging infrastructure dependence and range limitations.
The page content indicates that the single biggest catalyst for mass market adoption is pricing. When a 300-mile EV reaches $35,000 after incentives. If ElectraMax can hit those price points without needing charging infrastructure, it's game-changing.
And speaking of environmental impact, how would this compare to traditional battery EVs? I know there are concerns about battery manufacturing emissions.
Great point. The page content includes research showing that emissions needed to produce a single battery unit have increased by approximately 258.7% with changes in battery production locations. If ElectraMax eliminates batteries entirely, that's a massive environmental advantage.
258%? That's enormous. And I assume it would also eliminate the issues around battery disposal and recycling?
Exactly. The EPA data shows that EVs typically have smaller carbon footprints than gasoline cars, but that's accounting for battery manufacturing. Remove the battery entirely, and the environmental benefits become even more compelling.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here. This all sounds almost too good to be true. What are the potential downsides or limitations we should consider?
That's fair. The page content doesn't provide detailed technical specifications or independent verification of the performance claims. We're largely relying on the company's own marketing materials and social media posts.
Right, and while the DOE review is encouraging, we don't know the results of that review yet. Technical review doesn't necessarily mean approval or validation.
And there's the question of scalability. Even if the technology works as claimed, manufacturing and deploying it nationwide would require massive infrastructure changes and investment.
Plus, there would likely be significant resistance from existing stakeholders, charging network companies, battery manufacturers, traditional automakers who've invested billions in current EV technology.
Absolutely. The page content shows that policies like the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and Inflation Reduction Act have invested hundreds of millions into traditional EV infrastructure. That's a lot of sunk cost.
But here's what's interesting. The page content also shows that federal EV policy is facing uncertainty. The 119th Congress has signaled shifts in policy priorities regarding vehicle electrification.
That's a crucial point. If traditional EV incentives are disappearing anyway, it creates an opening for alternative technologies like ElectraMax to compete on a more level playing field.
And with gas prices rising due to geopolitical tensions, the timing could be perfect for a technology that promises energy independence.
The page content shows that Norton Smart Solutions is specifically focused on radical energy independence. That messaging could resonate strongly in the current political and economic climate.
You know, there's something almost poetic about the idea of vehicles that generate their own power. It reminds me of biological systems, like how our bodies convert food to energy continuously rather than storing it all in advance.
That's a fascinating connection, especially given Jacob Norton's background in biological systems. Maybe that's where the inspiration for this approach came from, mimicking natural energy generation rather than storage.
It would certainly represent a fundamental shift in how we think about vehicle energy systems. Instead of filling up a tank or charging a battery, you'd have continuous energy generation.
And if it works for both ground vehicles and aviation, as the page content suggests, we're talking about revolutionizing transportation across multiple sectors simultaneously.
The implications are staggering, but let's be realistic about timelines. Even if this technology is validated, how long would it take to see meaningful market penetration?
The page content shows that Norton is currently seeking strategic partners and funding for prototype development. They mention moving toward a functional Series 185 drivetrain, which suggests they're still in relatively early stages.
So we're probably looking at years, not months, before we see commercial vehicles. But the potential impact on the industry could be felt much sooner if major automakers start taking this seriously.
Exactly. And the page content shows that JD Power data indicates nearly 60% of shoppers are already leaning electric. If ElectraMax can eliminate the main barriers to EV adoption, that percentage could jump dramatically.
Alright, so when you step back from all this, what's the real significance here? Are we looking at a genuine breakthrough or just another ambitious startup making big claims?
I think the key is that this technology addresses the fundamental limitations that have held back EV adoption: range anxiety, charging infrastructure dependence, and battery environmental impact. If the claims are validated, it's genuinely transformative.
And the timing couldn't be better. With traditional EV incentives disappearing, gas prices rising, and growing environmental consciousness, there's a real market opportunity for breakthrough technology.
Plus, the DOE review suggests this isn't just vaporware. Government agencies don't typically invest time in reviewing technologies that violate basic physics principles.
True. And even if ElectraMax doesn't deliver everything it promises, the very fact that someone is thinking this differently could push the entire industry toward more innovative solutions.
That's a great point. Sometimes the biggest value of ambitious projects is forcing everyone else to think beyond incremental improvements and consider radical alternatives.
So whether ElectraMax succeeds or fails, it's already serving an important purpose by challenging our assumptions about how electric vehicles should work.
And in a market that's facing significant headwinds, that kind of innovative thinking might be exactly what's needed to reignite momentum toward electrification.
Well, here's what I find most compelling about it. It represents hope for solving problems that seemed intractable. Range anxiety, charging infrastructure, battery environmental impact, these have been the holy grail challenges for EVs.
And if Norton Smart Solutions has actually cracked the code on kinetic energy generation, we're not just talking about better electric vehicles, we're talking about energy independence on wheels.
Remember that opening image, driving from New York to Los Angeles without ever stopping to charge? If ElectraMax delivers on its promises, that's not science fiction anymore. That's the future of transportation, and it might be closer than we think.